Premijeru filma omogućili su vam inicijativa 40 dana za život i Udruga Hrvatska za život.
The reality is that for years I struggled with hating myself. I struggled with believing that I was the worst part of society there is.
Stand up, fight back! Women's rights are under attack! What do we do? Stand up, fight back!
I'd rather not have it, and at least in my heart will, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, if I don't have it and I kill it, the baby's going to heaven.
Once I worked at Planned Parenthood and I would go through the options, from the bottom of my heart, I believed the abortion was the best idea.
And there's nothing wrong with abortion. It's a moral decision. It's a responsible decision.
I agreed to do this film for those individuals that have been where I've been, that have been on the other side of the clinic, that have been inside the clinic.
I wanted to provide another service to women. Because I thought that would make them happier, healthier, more whole. I wanted to be a good OBGYN, and a good OBGYN does those procedures. That's all.
Women deserve better. We deserve the truth. We deserve options. Being pro-life is the choice.
I believe that abortion is absolutely the most fundamental human rights issue of our time, and always will be, even after we overturn Roe v. Wade.
Abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. But the only thing right now out of those three that we're living with is that it's legal.
There are those of us on the pro-life side that will not judge you. Know that we're all not the same, but there are those of us who understand the truth.
For the last 40 years, women have not been forced to have children against their will. It's a very important thing for women to be able to decide for themselves when and whether they're going to have children. If you want to have a child, it's a wonderful thing. But if you don't want to have a child, being forced to is a form of enslavement.
For over 40 years, our nation has been divided. It's a battle of ideologies between abortion rights advocates and the pro-life movement.
Young people are pro-life because our world, despite these 40 years of legalized abortion, are as uncomfortable with it as ever. In the political realm, in a church sermon, in a debate, no matter when the word abortion comes up, we're uncomfortable.
It's something that I think in schools it's not really, you don't really talk about it, you try to avoid talking about it, but it's really such a huge issue.
For me, it's just incredible sadness that after 40 years, children are still being killed. It's just abortion on demand, and it's getting worse.
40 is the number for the end of testing, and I feel like in some ways that we are kind of coming out of a wilderness. America is awakening to the reality of what abortion really is.
Abortion is always going to be controversial in our society when people determine that they are the arbiters of right and wrong. They are the arbiters of life and death, and it's a woman's choice to decide.
When I read the Roe v. Wade decision and realized that it would be legal in this country, not only legal, but it would be almost promoted, that you can kill any child in the womb up to and including the day of that child's birth. The child could even get born through an abortion and you could let it die, kill it, not give care. That was outrageous.
When you actually read the decision, it is so indefensible as a legal matter, and even pro-choice legal scholars who like the result have come out and admitted, oh, you know, the analysis here is complete garbage.
Justice Harry Blackmun, who wrote the majority opinion in Roe v. Wade, ruled that the 14th Amendment entailed a right to privacy, which included the right for a woman to have an abortion.
Privacy is not in the Constitution. You can't find that word anywhere in there. But the Supreme Court, by extension, pushed it in there enough to pass two decisions, Roe versus Wade out of Texas and Doe versus Bolton out of Georgia. Neither case gave grounds for this kind of a decision at all. So, as one of the justices said, it was cut from whole cloth. It was made up and handed to us as something constitutional. If you read the Constitution carefully, there's nothing that suggests that you could ever have an abortion.
Roe v. Wade was an assault at the very foundation of what our country was built upon, the rule of law, and slow, careful decision-making processes, looking at precedent and dealing with our written Constitution seriously. And that was not done in 1973.
In the 70s, nobody wanted to talk about it. They wanted to say it was settled law, the Supreme Court had ruled, no point in talking about it. We believed it was important to show people what abortion really was and go out on the streets, do protests, picket a lot of the same kinds of things that we did in the civil rights movement.
In the early days of the pro-life movement, where we actually sat down, in the early days we actually called them sit-ins, but to sit down in front of the doors to an abortion clinic to defend the unborn in that way, I still think is a valid approach, as long as it's nonviolent.
This movement is all about equality. It's all about justice. It's really a very simple concept, so simple and yet so easily forgotten in the course of human history that we think that some groups of people really aren't as equal as the rest.
I don't think that the tragedy of abortion, the enormous damage that's been done to our culture and our society is going to be over in a short time.
You're in the 21st century, and women have a right to choose, and it's our bodies.
When someone says it's my body, it's my choice, I often look at them and say, well, what about the body of the child? I'm not asking people to say that the baby's rights supersede the mother's. Pro-choicers say that the mother's rights supersede the child, and my argument is that they are equal, that they have equal rights, that they are both equal persons.
Sometimes people see being against abortion as being anti-woman because it's assumed that the person who is against abortion only cares about the child. And so I think it's very important that when people articulate, they have to be able to articulate why being against abortion is actually pro-woman. And I think that needs to be articulated well, and it needs to be articulated carefully.
Women need to decide what choices need to be made over their own bodies.
I feel like the woman's right to choose, they're basically choosing for you, because they already know once they put everything in your head, you're going to choose abortion. You're going to choose what they want you to choose.
I considered being pro-choice to be rational, compassionate, realistic, and being responsive to the present-day reality. It meant that I was a compassionate human being who cared about women, cared about the world, and had a realistic view of what was going on.
We believed that we were providing a much needed and much misaligned but misunderstood service. We truly, truly did. And that's the scariest part. When I look back, is I really didn't think we were hurting them.
I just bought into the whole, it was my body, it was my choice. And I never followed that through to realize that meant that somehow it was my problem. I had to take care of this problem when I became pregnant.
I would have to say that, like most liberties in the United States, you know, my right to swing my fist ends where your nose starts. And I feel very much the same way about a pregnant mother and about that genetically unique, unrepeatable, and irreplaceable child that already exists.
It is my body. It is my choice. That's tough. The problem is it isn't just involving my body at a certain point. It's somebody else's body, which is a baby's body.
Some say that it's perfectly okay to kill a fetus because it can't survive on its own outside the mother's womb. Others say that a baby, a toddler, or even a 4-year-old can't take care of themselves and are totally dependent on their mother as well. Where do we draw the line?
Well, the pro-choice side tends to often emphasize bodily autonomy. The idea that, well, even if it's a human being, no human being has the right to depend on and to use another human being's body. I find that argument misses the point, because if it's in fact a human being, then a mother does have an obligation to her child in the same way she would have an obligation to any born child.
When I would meet somebody, or when I meet someone who says, I'm pro-choice, it's a woman's choice, usually I ask to choose what? What is abortion? What does abortion do? What does abortion do to that unborn life? What is the unborn child?
When you look at the reasons women have abortions, and there have been many studies on this from pro-choice groups, very much, I can't afford a kid, or I'm wanting to continue my education, this, that, and the other. They don't have anything to do with pregnancy. They have to do with the baby after the baby is born, not wanting to care for the baby. It has nothing to do with her body. No one ever says, I'm having an abortion because I feel like my body is being invaded by an alien parasite. Like, that's the kind of language, that's the rhetoric that's used in some of these pro-choice circles, but it's so far removed from reality. That's just not the reality.
It's my body, it's my choice is a veneer, and underneath is, I don't know if I can count on the guy who said he loved me. I don't know how my parents are going to react. I don't know if my school will support me, or if I get a job, if I'm going to make a living wage, and will it include health care. I mean, that's what the reality is for most women.
If you add up all the American casualties of brave men and women who died in all the major U.S. wars in the 20th century combined, they don't equal the number of lives lost through abortion in just the year 2012 alone, when over 1.2 million unborn children perished through abortion. Every day, well over 3,300 unborn children lose their lives in abortion clinics across our nation, and it's never reported.
I think that it's good for us to remember those lives, though, and allow it to grieve us a little each day, so that it can inspire us to never rest and never be silent and never grow lazy in our work, because the death toll continues each day.
The numbers are truly staggering when you really look at the impact, and no matter how you try to graph it out, no matter how many stadiums you try to fill up, no matter how many states you try to put in the perspective that wouldn't be here, our minds just can't comprehend that.
Since 1973, 40 years ago, we've lost 55 million babies. Many of those babies were African American babies, and I'm an African American woman. 2 of those babies were mine.
Abortion is the #1 cause of death in the Black community, greater than AIDS, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and violent crimes combined.
In the Black community, 1,452 Black lives are lost every day. This is tragic. This is horrible. These are lives. These are points of potential, points of light, who could have contributed positively to our communities.
As I began to travel across America, I began to see that the abortion clinics, Planned Parenthood clinics specifically, because they are the largest abortion provider in America, are on or near streets named after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And part of that effort was, well, we're going to target the Black community. We don't want them to know it. Their hero is Martin Luther King Jr. So let's move our clinics into those areas, and people would be a little more willing to accept what we're offering.
According to research by Protecting Black Life, 79% of Planned Parenthood abortion facilities are located in minority neighborhoods.
It saddens me when I hear that African American women are 12% of the population, but we make up 40% of children being aborted. Because basically, I mean, we're just throwing generations down the drain, and we're not giving our children a chance to live.
You think of 40 years of the destruction, not just of the unborn, but of millions and millions harmed in that process, both women and men. And so we're looking at devastating numbers in the Black community, where 60% of Black pregnancies in New York City are aborted.
But there is not a greater attack on minorities, and especially Black children, than abortion. And that's what's going on in the minority neighborhoods, in the urban neighborhoods. There is an attack on Black children.
2010, I had one. And it's something that you constantly think about. Like, you would think it was just, okay, well, I go in, I get this abortion, like all my problems is wiped away, I don't think about it anymore. And it's not the case at all. Because regardless of, no, you might can't see that baby physically, but mentally, you know it was there. You know this is what you done. And you think about what this baby could have been, or what was the sex of the baby, or how old your baby may be now. I was awoke during my abortion, so I seen the baby going into the container, and it's not a pretty sight. And just seeing that image, and then when you go to other places and they try to show you images of baby, you be like, you don't want to see that. You seen it before. I actually regret it because I feel like I had the abortion to turn around in the same year and have to be pregnant again with another baby. I had made an appointment, waited for the appointment to come, drove from Indiana to the north side of Chicago and walked in, and I just couldn't do it. I was only in there like literally 2 seconds. I walked in and walked back out. And it was like, what made this child different from this child? I probably would have been with both. I don't know.
Abortion also greatly impacts the Hispanic community. Latinas make up about 16% of the U.S. female population, but they account for nearly a quarter of all abortions, to the tune of over 300,000 every year, breaking down to over 825 abortions by Latinas every day.
Latinas girls usually think they don't have enough support from family, from boyfriends, or even married couples sometimes financially think they cannot handle.
Planned Parenthood strategically targets the Hispanic community with countless abortion clinics in Latino barrios across America, as well as with marketing campaigns.
I am that poverty Hispanic female that Planned Parenthood, is constantly on the TV priding themselves that they're helping me. I was her. Never once did Planned Parenthood give me information to empower me to make an informed decision. When I was 16 years old, I walked into Planned Parenthood for the first time in my life to exercise my freedom of choice. And I believed with everything that I had in my being at that time that it was a legal procedure and it was my right. 4 years later, at the age of 20, on my 5th abortion, I realized for the very first time that my freedom of choice meant 5 children gone forever. Abortion is something that will be with you for the rest of your life. And so if you're looking at this film today and you're thinking you want to exercise your freedom of choice, just know that freedom will be with you for the rest of your life. And that regret will never go away.
A lot of people thought that they were helping women and really giving them the solution. And now people are, after all these years and all the years of suffering, more and more people are starting to come forward and say, look what it did to my life.
Fetuses are definitely not babies. They have the potential to become humans. They will become babies if they go through a 9-month process of growing and developing within a woman's body.
It is not a baby. A baby is a fetus that has been born. We need to maintain medical decisions over our bodies in conjunction with the doctors.
We all believe in the industry, on the abortion side, that we're killing human life. It's just a necessary evil. Just like you can justify, self-defense.
Every individual human life begins at conception when a fertilized egg now has a unique genetic pattern that did not exist before. That life goes through various stages, but it begins at conception.
And yet we're now adding, consciousness, sentience, movement. But sadly, that discussion has almost passed us by, because most people in the medical community believe that life begins at implantation. It's embryologically and genetically distinctly human, because it's not an oak tree, it's not a bird, it's not a car, it's not, it's not a cat. And it's distinct from mom or dad. I'm not in the business of, guessing or becoming less precise. I'm in the business of science. It's human and it's alive at fertilization.
Clearly, it's not just a clump of tissue, but that's just a justification that people use to convince themselves that abortion is okay, or to convince others.
After 18 days, the baby has a heartbeat. A lump of tissue doesn't have a heartbeat.
Now, we will say to people who are young and impressionable, don't worry about it, it's just a blob of tissue, to try to prevent them from engaging the difficult decision of having an abortion. Why would you put pressure on this woman not to have the termination? It's a tough decision already. You try to eliminate suffering as much as possible. Blob of tissue, it's basically saying you're not mature enough to be given this information.
There are many people who believe that fetuses are not persons until they reach a certain stage, such as viability, the capacity to feel pain, or until they are born.
Do you understand that 90+% of OBGYNs terminate sick children? So where do you draw the line there? Anencephaly, no brain? Do you eliminate a child with cystic fibrosis? Do you Tay-Sachs disease? Do you eliminate Down syndrome? Where do you draw the line then? The conditions that you should abort for just increase every year. Quality of life, it's a slippery slope.
An adult was a teenager, was a child, was a toddler, was an infant, was a fetus, was an embryo, was a zygote. It goes all the way back, and there is no one point. There is no personhood fairy that's there to say, now you have real individuality. No, it goes all the way back to conception. Are we going to discriminate based on age in a way that is lethal? No. That's unethical, that's immoral, and you don't need religion to get there.
Legal protection for the human person from biological beginning to natural death is the first milestone. It's the first goal we need to accomplish if we want to create a culture of life, love, and beauty.
We needed to focus on what the crux of the issue is. And we knew Roe versus Wade, which was the decision that liberalized abortion in America, said if the case were ever made that the unborn child is a person, well, then the argument for abortion collapses. I think we have created the debate over personhood and made that word in the forefront of people's minds. And we've brought to people's attention that we don't treat the preborn child as a human, as a person, but rather a piece of property.
Personhood is definitely necessary in order to lay a foundation to overturn Roe versus Wade and to end abortion in America. I don't want to see this issue just merely tossed to the states. The 14th Amendment says that no state shall deprive a person of their right to life without due process of law, and that no state shall deny a person equal protection of the laws.
The right to abortion is a right. It is a fundamental right for women's lives. And being for the right to abortion means that I respect the humanity of women.
This is a human right, it's a women's right.
Well, humanists have a long-standing tradition of being for social justice and equality and for fighting for the little guy. And humanists seem to not make that connection that when it comes to the preborn, if the preborn are human beings, if they're a member of the human family, then the extension has to be made that if we're going to fight for equality and for social justice for the weak and for the underprivileged and other people who've been marginalized, that has to include the preborn, if the preborn are human beings.
This is the cause, this is the civil rights issue of our day, and it's worth every painful moment, every joyous victory. It's worth every ounce of energy within us to defend human life and to restore dignity in a culture that has lost sense of the awe and wonder of human life.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
When my uncle, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, we must all begin to agree that it is an unjust thing to take the life of a little baby in the womb.
It is the most important issue of our time because it's the most fundamental issue. If there's no right to live, no other rights matter.
Unborn children are the most defenseless members of our society. They have no way to fight back, they have no way to speak out, no way to stand up for themselves. And so we see the attack on their fundamental right, their right to life, when they're being killed by the thousands each day legally, as the greatest human rights abuse I believe our country has ever seen.
The pro-life movement began as a civil rights movement. For the first portion of the movement, they did not want to have the movement being identified with Catholicism. So they were very careful about presenting a civil rights and a human rights angle on the movement, where nowadays nobody will even hear pro-life and think anything else but, oh, Christian, religious.
The abortion movement's strategy was to make this a religious issue. They pitted, the enlightened, progressive abortion supporters versus those backward Catholics. And by doing that, they completely marginalized any non-Catholic opposition to abortion in the public sphere and in the media. And we're still seeing the reverberations of that today. And whenever a pro-life leader assumes that every pro-lifer is Christian, they walk right into the pro-choice trap. It's been laid there by design, and they've got to stop. Whoever wants to help us save babies is welcome.
When someone gives a religious argument, immediately the person says, oh, I don't have to listen to that because I'm not a Christian, therefore they will throw out the entire message.
Look at human trafficking. If you look at human trafficking, you see lots of faith-based organizations working against human trafficking because it's part of their faith and good for them. But nobody ever says, well, human trafficking must be a religious issue. No. And that's how abortion's got to be. It's got to be in that sort of frame.
There's no greater issue, there's no greater cause than the fact that unborn children that are the most vulnerable are being killed by the thousands. And so I think that regardless of your political persuasion or your religious persuasion or whatever you otherwise believe, everyone can agree that human life must be protected, especially in its weakest forms.
incest are horrific crimes of aggression against another person. Everyone agrees that those who commit them should be punished to the full extent of the law. Why should a woman who's been raped have to carry to term a rapist's child?
My first advice would be, let's make sure that you're getting the help that you need to deal with the rape. When a woman is raped, she's violated in the most horrendous way that a woman can be violated. When a woman who finds herself pregnant after a rape then aborts the child, she then finds herself being the victimizer after having been the victim. And it's actually more damaging to the woman. It perpetrates the rape again and again for her.
One of the most difficult issues to deal with is the issue that is always used to justify 100% of abortions, and that's rape. And that's why I think it's important that those like me and Rebecca Kiesling and Pam Stencil and so many others who were born as a result of rape can speak specifically to that issue.
Rebecca Kiesling is an attorney, an international pro-life speaker, and a mother who was adopted nearly from birth. At the age of 18, Rebecca discovered that her conception was the result of a brutal rape.
My birth mother was abducted by a serial rapist, and she actually went to 2 back alley abortionists, and I was almost aborted. We met when I was 19, and she was thrilled to meet me. We had a beautiful reunion, but when I asked about abortion, she did share with me that she would have aborted me if it had been legal, and later shared about those 2 back alley abortionists. But I was legally protected. My birth mother did not choose life for me. She chose abortion, but pro-life advocates chose life for me.
Ryan Bomberger's biological mother was raped in 1970. Despite her pain, she courageously chose life. Ryan was adopted as a baby into a loving, multiracial family of 15, 10 of whom were adopted.
You know, when you're born as a result of rape, like I was, and you're labeled as unwanted and unadoptable, it kind of puts you in a specific category. But my parents defied all that. They shattered the myth of the unwanted. They loved me like crazy, and because they adopted me, they unleashed purpose in my life.
Today, Ryan Bomberger is a passionate advocate for adoption. He is married and the father of 4 children, 2 of whom are adopted. As a high school student, Ashley Segrest was raped. As it happens so often, the rapist was someone she knew and trusted. The rape was never reported to law enforcement.
I found out that I was pregnant from rape when I was 18 years old. Everyone who I had told about my rape and that I was pregnant told me that abortion was the answer. When I tried to tell the clinic workers that I wasn't sure if I wanted to have the abortion, that I had been raped, no one offered me any help. They just kept passing me on to the next person. Everyone thinks it's okay to kill a rapist's baby, but what I found out is I didn't kill a rapist's baby, I killed my baby. And coming to terms with that was far worse than having to deal with the rape itself. Because it's every day of my life, I'm missing a child, I'm missing a 14-year-old son.
According to the U.S. Supreme Court, there's no death penalty for rapists. Even child molesters don't deserve the death penalty, that's cruel and unusual punishment. I certainly don't believe that a child conceived in rape deserves the death penalty.
The issue is it a child or not? If this is a life, if this is a human being, under what circumstances do we kill another person? And that's really the end of the debate.
There's a lot more people in this country who are conceived in rape than people think. We are 1% of the population. According to the CDC, there's over 32,000 rape-related pregnancies in the U.S. every year. And the majority of them are born. 25,000 to 27,000 are born every year. When you look at the birth rate for the United States, that is 1%.
And any woman who's ever lost a child, whether it was through abortion, miscarriage, an accident, or a disease, your heart always longs for that baby. Abortion is not the answer to rape. Rape is not an excuse for an abortion. And I speak out because I want to protect those women who've been raped, to let them know you are better than abortion. Your baby is worth more than abortion.
The people who are healed become, they're in the forefront of speaking the truth, because those who've lost their children know the lived truth of abortion, and that's important.
I had an abortion when I was 24 years old, and I know that I didn't feel any sense of regret for 11 years. I had kind of separated myself from it. But then I did feel great regret and remorse, deep, soul-wrenching regret and remorse. But I think some women don't feel regret and remorse because they've distanced themselves from it and they just keep it pushed away. Actually, I think that that's probably a lot of people in the pro-choice movement, I think, have done that. So I don't think everybody feels regret, but I would tend to think it's because they haven't looked very hard at what they've done.
We met through a mutual friend of ours at one of the bars in town. That night, we went to their sorority house, and I ended up spending the night at her place. The next day, I left, and we didn't talk. She had texted me a few times, tried to call me, I never answered. I received a letter from her. She had told me that after the night that we had spent together, that she was pregnant. When I read that, my heart just sank. Thinking, very selfishly, but thinking, well, this is it for me. And then she told me that, I didn't need to worry about it. She didn't feel like she could handle it, and she killed a child. After the fact, when I was by myself, that's when I did the most damage to myself. I tried to hide it as much as I could because it was killing me on the inside. And I would say, it's okay. It'll be fine. And it never was. It never was fine because not only did I affect the life of a young lady who now has to live with this for the rest of her life, has to keep this secret for the rest of her life, that because of our irresponsibility, that we destroyed a life. I still think about it. Absolutely, I do. And I mean, to this day, I regret it. Not coming forward and, trying to talk to her about it.
Aha moment, right, of being pro-choice, and then I have 3 living children. That didn't even do it. It was learning of a surrogate mother, an acquaintance, friend of a friend, who part of her contract was genetic testing on the baby she was carrying for a genetically unrelated couple. And she had the testing done, and it came back positive for Down syndrome, so the baby would be born with Down syndrome. And she was offered payment of her contract in full to abort, and she did. And that's when the light bulb finally went off, that children are now a commodity to be created and bought and sold and discarded. And it finally led me to really question my deeply held beliefs, and also to examine my own role and take responsibility in my own role in the death of my first child and my role in the deaths of thousands of children at the center.
Abortion is a betrayal of feminism. This is animal farm feminism.
This is something we all reject because it rejects the basic tenets of feminism, which are nonviolence, non-discrimination, and justice for all. We know that abortion is a reflection that we have not met the needs of women, and women deserve better.
Lila Rose and her organization, Live Action, has produced a series of undercover videos that has forced Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry to confront and amend practices they cannot defend.
Planned Parenthood is definitely the industry leader for abortion. They're now sitting on $1 billion of assets. They get about $500 million in tax dollars. They commit over 1/4 of the abortions in our country every year. And they're propagating abortion internationally as well.
Live Action's recent Inhuman investigation has shed further light on the normalcy of the abortion industry's practices, including late-term abortions and infanticide.
If people only knew what it really was like inside these abortion clinics, what a Planned Parenthood really does, what their ideology is, what their practices are, then people would be upset and people would stand up and say, we have to stop this. It's amazing what a little bit of visual truth can do to open people's eyes and to exhort them to stand up and to take action. And when we capture a lot of undercover tape of Planned Parenthood, even executives saying outrageous things, or Planned Parenthood managers counseling our actors posing as sex traffickers, how to further traffic young sex slaves, things like that, people are outraged, regardless of even where they stood on abortion ahead of time. They're outraged and they start to question the organization, and they ultimately start to question abortion.
In 2013, America witnessed one of the most horrific capital murder trials ever. Philadelphia abortionist Dr. Kermit Gosnell was convicted of 3 counts of murder in the deaths of born-alive infants at his House of Horrors clinic.
The children were born and then killed. Killed by putting scissors in the back of their neck and snipping their spinal cord.
Today, we've seen abortionist after abortionist after abortionist go to jail for doing live birth abortions, for sexually abusing women on the operating room table, for doing negligence and criminal misconduct.
Gosnell's abortion facility is not the only house of horrors in this country. Black pro-life leaders are calling for investigations of other abortion clinics like the one run by Kermit Gosnell.
Kermit Gosnell is a racist of the worst kind because he preyed on women and young girls of his own race. For more than 30 years, Kermit Gosnell participated in and perpetuated the epidemic of black-on-black crime.
We know that there's a significant increase in mental health issues among post-abortive women. We know that there's a link between depression, alcoholism, drug abuse. All those things can come in the aftermath of abortion.
The very young girls are afraid because they're very young, 14, 15 years old. They're afraid the boyfriend has probably left them, and they feel like their whole life is gone. Or the girl who's going to college, I can't do this, I have to go to school. And that's the most important thing to them and the most fearful thing to them at the moment.
She knows she has another choice other than have abortion. She knows she has a choice to have the child. She's afraid. She doesn't, the uncertainty, what are people going to think? How will I take care of this child? How is my life going to change?
I've been in that state of mind, like feeling alone and having no one to run to, who's going to be there to help me when the father was like, he wanted nothing to do with neither of us.
I feel like if I would say to somebody that was my age and was going through the predicament that I was going through, I would say choose life because, I mean, a baby, it's hard, I'm not gonna lie, but it pays off in the end and you have the baby to love unconditionally.
But after years of working with young teen girls who were pregnant, if they got through that initial fear, at the end of it, when they looked back, they were far more grateful for a decision to carry their child to term, whether they parented or placed. And the girls who aborted will always come back and say, I regret that. I didn't feel like I had a choice.
Don't be afraid. Let's take a deep breath and let's look at the wonders of your life if you bring
forth this child. You may think abortion is a quick fix and it'll be over, but it's not over. We have millions now of testament for people that say, I still remember the day it was supposed to be born. I still remember the day that I went in that clinic.
Being scared is part of the process, but abortion is not the answer. And I have some words of encouragement. You've got time. You've got all the time to make this decision. Don't allow anyone to force you into a clinic, to force you into a decision, because you're scared. You'll live with that for the rest of your life. That will be a regret that you'll never be able to walk away from.
Over the last 40 years, the witness of pro-lifers on the street in front of abortion clinics has saved countless lives. Sidewalk counselors, prayer vigils, and movements like 40 Days for Life have saved thousands of unborn children from abortion.
40 Days for Life was born out of one thing, an hour of prayer. It was myself and 3 other people that were frustrated because abortions were climbing in our community. The Planned Parenthood abortion facility was continuing to increase the number of abortions, and we had tried everything we knew how to do, and none of it seemed to be getting the results that we were hoping for.
We've seen nearly 7,000 babies that we know of been saved from abortion at the very last moment. We've had post-abortive women lead 40 Days for Life campaigns. We've seen it go from one city in College Station, Texas, to 482 cities in 15 different countries around the world.
So that 1 hour of prayer, the 40-day time frame, those 3 activities, prayer and fasting, vigil and outreach, that was the birth of 40 Days for Life.
And I started having secular pro-life members ask me, what's up with these prayer vigils and what can I do as an atheist to be part of this? And I was talking with 40 Days, and they said, atheists can come. You can hold your sign and you can be there and support. Obviously, the atheists probably won't pray, and they might find that a little alienating. But if they want to be there, they're welcome.
I was born before Roe, but just barely. And most people today have never known a day without legalized abortion. And so they never stop to think, what would a woman need? What would she want instead of an abortion? They never ask, why are so many women having abortions? And because they just buy into the status quo, they never question and think maybe women deserve something better than abortion.
I ran into a pro-life activist, and so she sat down and she showed me a movie that really touched my heart. And so it made me start crying. And so when I got home, I basically prayed to God and asked him to help me. And so the next day I called the abortion clinic and told them to cancel the abortion. Abortion is not right at all. Abortion is just legalized murder to me.
I do sidewalk counseling, and so I'm at the abortion facilities. Sometimes I'm there when the girls leave, and their heads are down, they're sad, nothing has improved for them in their situation from when they entered the building until when they left. But now they have even more heaviness and sadness than when they arrived.
In recent years, pregnancy centers have been playing a vital role in providing women with real options. There's been a quiet campaign for women's hearts and minds going on in over 2,500 pregnancy centers across our nation.
And they're coming into our clinics because we don't judge them. We give them education, we give them answers, and 77% change their mind because of the services and education we provide with them.
At Heartbeat International, we call these very caring people that are staffing our pregnancy centers the foot soldiers of the pro-life movement, armed with love, because it is love and caring and support that we're armed with.
I serve with CareNet, and we have over 1,100 of these centers, more of them every day being planted in the urban community that are providing life-affirming solutions for women and men who find themselves in an unplanned pregnancy.
One of the things that amazes me too, though, is that not only are we saving thousands and thousands of babies, but we are preventing abortions. by helping women understand their true dignity so that they don't choose abortion and they won't choose it the next time if they become pregnant because they have a whole different concept of themselves.
One of these places of hope is the Women's Center. Since 1984, the organization has helped nearly 37,000 women who are seriously considering an abortion to change their minds and keep their unborn children. Mary Strom has been the executive director of the Women's Center for nearly a decade.
We recognize that only the mother can choose life or abortion, and that if we really want her to choose life, we have to focus on her and on her needs and help her. Because a lot of times there are very serious circumstances and difficult things that are causing them to panic or causing them, to not think about any long-term decision, just my immediate crisis right now. And so there's a great deal of education that goes on, a great deal of listening, but it's getting to know her.
Since the Women's Center added ultrasound services a few years ago, between 75 and 80% of the women who were considering abortion as the plan for their pregnancy chose life.
We'll arrange for an ultrasound, and we feel that she has the right to know the truth that her baby exists, to see and to meet the baby. And of course, naturally women are bonded to their children, and a lot of times it's just seeing that child that overcomes all the barriers.
Pregnancy centers like the Women's Center are just one of thousands of centers that offer hope to desperate young women facing the reality of an unplanned pregnancy.
We give diapers. Last year we gave over $1 million worth of supply, of clothing and furniture and just things you need on a day-to-day basis. And they can come once a month after the baby's born. They can come once a month and shop for their whole family. We really do care about the women. It's not just their babies. We love the babies, of course. But be fair to yourself, love yourself, and give yourself the chance to be helped. We all need help.
I think there's a challenge for us as a human community that we have to be the people of love. We have to make it possible for men and women who are confronted, perhaps, with this pregnancy to be able to carry their baby. There are people who will adopt, there are people who will companion. We should be celebrating new life,
According to the National Adoption Council, in the U.S., there are between 1 and 2 million infertile couples and individuals who would like to adopt children. Yet more women choose abortion over adoption.
As someone who's adopted, it's really hard for me to grasp how our society can so easily write off human life as quote-unquote unwanted. So that's why I'm particularly passionate about this. I'm not only adopted, but I'm also an adoptive father. So I look at that loss of 55 million and it just seems, I don't know, it's painful to think of the lives that we are missing out on, the lives that could be impacting us, the lives that we could be loving.
When I would go through, once I worked at Planned Parenthood, and I would go through the options, and I would say, you have one option, which is to have the baby and keep the baby. You have another option, which is to have the baby and give it up for adoption. And you have a third option of having an abortion. I really believed, from the bottom of my heart, I believed the abortion was the best idea. I saw the other two as being cumbersome and difficult and damaging to the person in front of me. I absolutely believed, to the bottom of my heart, that abortion was the best option for her, although I did not necessarily see it as being morally the best option for her. But I really did believe that it was the best way out.
Today, Planned Parenthood vilifies adoption all the time. You obviously see it in their numbers. They abort 167 children for every one adoption referral. But they say that adoption, on their website, in their tool for educators, they say adoption is more emotionally, psychologically traumatic than abortion for a woman. So you have the pro-abortion side demonizing adoption, and the pro-life side still trying to grasp how beautiful an option it is.
You know, my mom placed me for adoption 45 years ago. I had no say-so in the situation, but I grew up in a household that certainly was far from perfect. But when I was 27 years old, I sought out my parents, and I wanted to say to them one thing, and that was thank you.
There are millions of families out there who really would love to welcome a baby into their home, and they're facing fertility problems of one sort or another. They would love the opportunity to take a new baby and to make that child part of their own family. It's an option that very few young women think about, and yet it's probably one of the best choices they could possibly make at that stage. If a girl is pregnant and she doesn't have the kind of support or system available for her to make it possible to raise her child.
This is a beautiful and loving option, and we need to focus more time and attention on adoption because everyone isn't in a position where they should raise yet one more, especially in our hard-hit communities.
For a young woman who feels like abortion is the only solution and is offered adoption, she's able to see beyond the present moment and see what is possible in the future. And she makes a loving parenting option by choosing a couple who will love her child.
Every year since 1974, hundreds of thousands of pro-life advocates attend the annual March for Life in Washington, D.C. on the anniversary of Roe v. Wade.
I just feel so happy and uplifted to be around everybody who has the same ideals, who wants to see life and wants to imagine a future without abortion.
Today marks a somber moment in our country's history where we remember that 55 million Americans have died as a result of legalized abortion in the last 4 decades.
The 40th anniversary of Roe v. Wade in January 2013 attracted a crowd of an estimated 650,000 people to the March for Life in our nation's capital. And the great majority of them were young people.
You know, I've always said to the young people, you are not just the future of the pro-life movement, you are the present as well. Because together, in an intergenerational way, we need to bring an end to this killing.
The March for Life started from small beginnings. In the very beginning, we had 7 people who came together in Nellie Gray's dining room and sat around the table and made the decision that we were going to do this, in spite of the fact that a lot of the national leaders thought we shouldn't take this risk.
Every year, despite the multitudes of young people, the mainstream media mostly ignores the March for Life.
I think there is a media bias because there has to be. They can't go on covering the truth. They can't go on, covering stories where 400,000 or more people are coming together to stand up against something that seems so culturally normal.
The issue of abortion, that is the hardest thing on my heart right now. And I'm so glad to be here to be protecting the innocent children.
I think at the level of the states, we're seeing major victories. Over 200 pro-life laws have been enacted in the last 3 years. And also in the court of public opinion, we're winning. More Americans are self-identifying as being pro-life.
It's really awesome, awe-inspiring to see hundreds of thousands, literally, of young people marching in D.C., marching on the West Coast, marching across the country, going to rallies. And it's because they believe that human life is nothing more important than human life. There's no greater cause to fight for.
It's all about the youth. It's all about us. This is such an energetic and vibrant generation. And for us to be here, it just kind of goes to show that we are the pro-life generation. We're going to end abortion.
A third of my generation is now missing. And people that could have been my best friends or people that I could have changed my life or changed this world are no longer here. So it's personal, and I can't ignore the fact that it's going on, and it's been going on for 40 years.
I need to do something about it. Like, I can't just stand there and not do anything about these people, these babies who are being killed for absolutely no reason whatsoever.
Every generation has something that can define them.
And right now, this generation, right now, I believe what will define them is this is the generation that will end abortion.
This is about educating a people that for 40 years haven't been given the full truth. It's time now to speak the truth.